I'm going to turn to Ambassador Lewis O'Neill, who will hopefully be able to sort of place what we've heard into some context, provide an American perspective. Just by way of introduction, Ambassador O'Neill worked in Moscow on legal reform issues as an advisor to the Russian Duma and Securities Commission upon completion of law school. Continued his career as an attorney with the law firm White & Case, and then with an investment fund in New York. In the early 2000s, Ambassador was a financial crimes prosecutor in New York County District Attorney's Office. In 2004, he was selected to be a White House Fellow and served as Secretary Powell's Special Planning Staff, Special Assistant for Russian Affairs. And completing the fellowship, he was asked to join the policy planning staff of the Department of State, where he covered the countries of the former Soviet Union. In 2006, the Belgian chairmanship of the OSCE appointed him as ambassador and head of the OSCE mission to Moldova. During the 2008 presidential campaign, Ambassador O'Neill served with then-candidate Obama's Russian-Eurasia foreign policy team. Ambassador's commentaries and analysis have appeared in various publications, including the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, Foreign Policy, and the Moscow Times. He's a graduate of Stanford University and Harvard Law School, studied at Moscow State, and a presidential Fulbright scholar. Ambassador O'Neill.
Well, thank you, Kyle. Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me today to share my views on the situation in the Republic of Moldova and the prospects for change and reform following the repeat elections there just now last Wednesday. I very much appreciate the Commission's interest in the fate and well-being of this small but not unimportant country. And I join many others in gratitude for the Commission's statements, public statements, in advance of these most recent elections and before and after the elections in April and the troubling events that followed. It's my pleasure to join Mr. Galver, Mrs. Kushnir, Mrs. Gogu today in briefing the panel, and I'm very grateful to Vlad Spinu and the Moldova Foundation for all of their hard work in publicizing and keeping Moldova in everyone's mind. Also, I'm very grateful to see colleagues from the OSCE in the back. Welcome. It's good that you're here. Well, what we've heard today from our colleagues on the panel, the results of last week's elections have the potential to represent an important step forward for Moldova, as like-minded reform parties now hold a slim majority in parliament. These four parties, the Liberals, the Liberal Democrats, the AMN, and the Democrats, are now in serious but very heated and not simple coalition talks, which would put, if successful, put the Communists in opposition for the first time in 8 years. If they come to agreement, these parties will have enough votes to elect the Speaker of Parliament and ratify the selection of the government by the President of Moldova. But in a case of deja vu all over again, they would not have enough votes to elect the President. That means that absent some kind of a coalition with the Communists or a defection from the Communists to the Liberal side, Moldova faces the same danger of deadlock and dissolution of Parliament that followed the last election. This could mean a lame duck legislature and no president until sometime in 2010. And this is an outcome that would be highly disadvantageous for advancing the important cause of reform in Moldova. An added danger is that the Moldovan constitution is extremely unclear on a number of very, very important points of electoral succession. Like, for example, when Mr. Vorin should step down as acting president. And the interpreting body, the Constitutional Court, is not seen by all as fair and balanced in its work. So we can expect some bare-knuckle negotiating both among the victorious parties, among themselves, and with the Communists, who are weakened, but still the most powerful single force in Moldova. Now, the vote on July 29th was heralded by all major international observers as largely meeting appropriate standards. But as we've heard today, Moldovan observers have been much more critical in their assessment of this vote. It is agreed, however, that both races, the July race and the April race, were marred by serious irregularities and violations, which included a campaign environment that was colored by subtle but real intimidation, bias in media coverage, and perhaps more importantly even, is an advantageous reach of media that was controlled by the ruling party, real problems with the voter lists, and insufficient cooperation by the Central Election Commission to address them. Election day problems like carousel voting, dead soul voting, harassment of voters, intimidation, and more technical violations. The use of administrative resources by the incumbents, and the threat of politicized criminal prosecutions in the run-up to the vote. These are all serious problems that must be addressed before Moldovans can have full confidence in their political system. But whoever comes to power in Moldova is going to face an enormous economic challenge. I'd like to stress on that today because we've heard more about the elections from our colleagues, and this isn't talked about enough. The already poor country is ill-equipped for the global financial crisis. For years, Moldova's economic and human potential have been trapped due to the lack of transparent, reliable, and fair economic and legal playing fields. Corruption, misuse of official position, and predatory advancement of personal interests over national ones remains a serious problem. Rule of law failures mean that resolving disputes in court is not seen as an optimal approach or solution. Inexplicable restrictions on business and arbitrary rules stifle creativity and expansion. Moldova's impressive growth during the pre-crisis years was largely due to remittances. By some estimates, up to 1/4 of the population lives abroad and works abroad and sending money back. In light of the global meltdown, however, we're seeing a real contraction in those remittances. So far in 2009, about 33% year-on-year contraction of remittances. And before the election, the communists had quite seriously burned through financial currency reserves to prop up the lei, the local currency. And they also ensured that social payments were made on time to their constituents, to everyone, but focused on their constituents. It is not clear that this can continue any longer. Thus, the new government must waste little time in implementing a comprehensive program of economic liberalization, combined with serious measures to combat corruption and attract foreign capital and investment. If not, it could well take the blame for Moldovan's economic pain. Now, and also Moldova has not been without its economic suitors of late, with Russia and China offering loans of $500 million and $1 billion respectively on very favorable terms. Just yesterday, the Russian ambassador to Chisinau, to Moldova, promised that the loan was going to be made not to Voronin, but to the Moldovan people. And we'll see if that holds true. Because before the election, Mr. Voronin had said that this was a political decision by Moscow in support of him. These moves are important because they underscore the relevancy of the U.S. Millennium Challenge Corporation's engagement with Moldova. Having received its threshold grant of $24.7 million to fight corruption, it is now key that Moldova's new leadership move quickly to assure the preconditions necessary for the release of the compact money, the much larger sum of money for supporting Moldova. Now, public opinion polls consistently show that the majority of Moldovans favor a sovereign, independent Moldova with a European future. So to achieve this aspiration, progress is needed in the following areas very, very urgently. First, legal and judicial reform. As I mentioned, there's been a problem with politicized prosecutions against rivals in business and politics. The judiciary has not been up to the task historically to act as a check on executive power. Creating a truly professional, independent judiciary is the most significant reform challenge facing Moldova. Police reform. We've just heard a very, very harrowing story, and unfortunately not a unique one. So Moldova needs clearly to much better police its police and police the agents of the state. Freedom of press and assembly. The government broadcaster Moldova 1 should be transformed into a legitimate, neutral public TV station with oversight provided to prevent abuse by politicians. Similarly, freedom of assembly must be guaranteed without undue restriction. Combating corruption. I think this is, Gogo said that this is the most corrupt country in Europe. I don't know about that, but corruption does remain the one issue that most directly touches the majority of Moldovan citizens and is very corrosive to society. And so urgent measures are needed in this area. Again, economic liberalization, I've mentioned that. And finally, political maturity. You know, our Russian friends say that the fish rots from the head. And the opposition must now do unto others as it would have liked to have been done to it. It mustn't descend into the same kind of retribution and petty squabbling and attacks, politicized attacks